My body wouldn't stop bleeding, and my consciousness was gradually fading. I could hear my mother crying and questioning. "Didn't you say it was just to get rid of the baby? How did it end up taking 2 lives?" My sister-in-law's voice remained calm. "Father has been prescribing that medicine for her for months, but she still didn't miscarry. I just got impatient and tripled the dosage." My brother roared. "She's dead already, so what's the point of screaming? If you don't want to go to jail, shut up!" The most terrifying thing was that the twins, my nephew and niece, clapped their hands cheerfully. "Auntie's money will all be ours now. Her toys and dolls will be ours too." My father sighed. "There's no saving her now. Hurry and get rid of all the medicine." My heart clenched in pain. So this was a premeditated murder, and the culprits were none other than my own family. Cold tears rolled down my face, carrying an overwhelming hatred and unwillingness. I struggled to take my last breath. When I woke up, I found myself lying on the sofa in my parents' house. A frantic voice called out from afar. "Emily, you've been asleep for 2 hours. Wake up and take your medicine." The strong scent of herbal medicine filled my nose. I jolted awake and looked at the date on my phone screen. I realized I had been reborn. I had returned to the day I first found out I was pregnant. In my previous life, when I discovered my pregnancy, my mother suggested that I come home for a while. She said my father was a skilled doctor and would take good care of me and the baby. But I never expected that from that moment on, they had already started plotting against the child in my womb. Taking the bowl of medicine from my mother, I looked at her meaningfully. Under my gaze, she seemed uneasy, forcing a stiff smile. "Hurry and drink it before it gets cold." I pouted playfully, just like before. "Mom, this medicine is so bitter. But my sister-in-law is also pregnant, right? Why don't we let her drink it instead? You can't spoil only me." My mother sighed in relief, the wrinkles on her forehead instantly smoothing out. She pointed at an identical bowl of medicine on the table. "Your father said that you and your sister-in-law have different constitutions, so the dosages are different. That bowl is for her." While she turned away, I swiftly switched the 2 bowls, suppressing the trembling in my heart. Then, I drank my sister-in-law's medicine. The aroma of food filled the house, creating a warm and cozy atmosphere. The hissing of the pressure cooker sounded exactly like the painful cries I had heard before I died in my past life. A chilling fear and loneliness I had never felt before washed over me. No matter how bad my birth family was, I had once seen it as a place to return to. But now, to me, it felt like a dark, horrifying hell. Their cruelty was all because of the billions of dollars that belonged to me and Ethan. Ethan was an orphan. When he married me, he had no family of his own. After we got married, he and I worked tirelessly, staying up late and waking up early to build our careers. Thanks to our efforts and a bit of luck, we eventually became wealthy, making a name for ourselves as a young entrepreneurial couple in Jiangning City. The only regret was that after 5 years of marriage, we still hadn't had a child. I once thought that if we never had children, then maybe our wealth could be left to my nephew and niece instead. But they were too impatient. The doorbell rang. Ethan stood at the door, carrying bags of groceries. He washed his hands and was about to help in the kitchen, but my parents beamed at him and pushed him onto the sofa. "Good son-in-law, you've been working hard all day. Just sit and wait for dinner." My father was a hypocrite. Outside, he acted generous. At home, he played the role of a kind and loving father, always pretending that money was just an external possession. But whenever his own interests, or my brother's, were involved, he would show his true colors immediately. My mother was even more pitiful. She had no independent thinking and no sense of right or wrong. She had spent her entire life as my father's shadow, always agreeing with everything he said. When I first met Ethan, and he brought gifts to visit my family, they wouldn't even let him in the house. They pointed at him and scolded, "The rich young men chasing after my daughter could form a line around this neighborhood. Look at yourself. No house, no car, no parents. You really have no shame." Part 2. Ethan was even more ridiculous. He said, Emily could be some old man's mistress, as long as the dowry is enough for me to buy a house. In the past, I always thought that no matter what, we were blood siblings, and he wouldn't go that far. But looking back now, every shameless word he spoke was utterly sincere. I had never assumed the worst when they suddenly changed their attitude toward Ethan. Turns out, people's hatred for someone could vanish the moment their poverty disappeared. During dinner, my sister-in-law, Helen, picked up my newly purchased crocodile leather handbag and said, "Emily, this bag must have cost you a lot, right? There's a parent-teacher meeting at the preschool in a few days, and I don't have a nice bag to bring. The ones you gave me before are all outdated now, and the other moms and teachers keep looking down on me." I snatched the bag from her hands and tossed it to the floor at their feet. "It's a parent-teacher meeting, not a wealth competition. If people look down on you, don't blame it on these bags. Besides, this one is expensive. Someone might even think you stole it." She froze for a few seconds, but didn't give up. Her fingers then brushed against the watch on my wrist. "Is this a real diamond-studded watch? It must be so expensive. Oh, I could never afford something like this in my lifetime." I lifted my eyelids and said coldly, "Yeah, not even in your next lifetime." This was one of her usual tricks. In my past life, since she had helped take care of my parents, I never fussed over these things. Every time she made a comment about how she could never afford something, I would turn it into a surprise gift for her during holidays and special occasions. Seeing my changed attitude, she was clearly caught off guard. Her eyes darted around for help, but when no one responded, she quickly changed the subject. "Ethan, has Emily mentioned the house near the school? When are you transferring the ownership to your brother-in-law?" So in my past life, under the relentless persuasion of my parents, I had indeed transferred the ownership of our 3-bedroom, 2-living-room house in that neighborhood to my brother. That was the best residential area in Jiangning, located near Nanhai Elementary School, and the property prices were extremely high. But after moving in, Helen quickly started complaining that the house was too small. It didn't have floor-to-ceiling windows, a children's room, or a maid's quarters. She then demanded that I exchange it for a bigger apartment in the same area. Ethan didn't even bother looking up as he stuffed food into his mouth. His tone was filled with dissatisfaction. "That's right. Ethan, what have you been so busy with all day? The kids are starting school next year. You, as their uncle, should be taking care of them." Whenever my brother spoke to Ethan, it was always in that condescending tone. A useless man who had achieved nothing in life, his proudest accomplishment was probably fathering a pair of twins. Many times in the past, I had wanted to lash out at him, but Ethan had always stopped me. Ethan would reassure me. "He considers me family, that's why he talks like that. It's okay." But I knew he simply didn't want to lower himself to Ethan's level. Ethan nodded, as if suddenly remembering something. "Oh, right. Emily mentioned it to me. That house. Next month, we will—" I grabbed a chicken drumstick and stuffed it into his mouth. "That house? I already sold it. The neighbors have a nephew about to start elementary school, and they've been begging me to sell it to them. I wasn't planning to, but they offered such a high price that I couldn't refuse." Helen and Ethan immediately jumped up. Ethan glared at me, his face contorted with rage, as if he wanted to tear me apart. Part 3. "Emily, didn't you already agree?" "So all your words were just garbage?" I put on a troubled expression. "The contract has already been signed. If not, then you'll have to cover the breach of contract fees. I'll sell you this house." Helen grew anxious and stomped her foot. "Sell it to us? Didn't you say you were giving it to us for free? We don't have the money to buy such an expensive house. Emily's parents, how can you go back on your word?" I ignored her. "Easton and Weston must go to the best elementary school. My children absolutely cannot lose at the starting line," I sneered. "Parents are the starting line for their children. If you didn't want to lose, why didn't you start working hard earlier? While I was working overtime until midnight, you were still lying in bed scrolling through TikTok. While Ethan was drinking with clients to the point of getting a stomach ulcer, you were busy fooling around with your party friends. Heck, you even got arrested for soliciting prostitutes. Others worked hard to plant the seeds, and you shamelessly want to harvest the fruits, acting as if it's only natural. Helen was so furious she couldn't speak. She slammed her chopsticks down and stormed into the bedroom. The twins had rice in their mouths, but immediately burst into tears. Looking at their innocent faces, I suddenly recalled their gleeful expressions right before I died. Auntie's money is ours now. Her dolls and toys are ours too. These kids were beyond saving. I had cherished them for 6 whole years, doted on them, and treated them with all my heart, only for them to utter such cold, heartless words the moment they learned I was about to die. I wasn't sure if it was the greasy food or the sheer disgust I felt toward these people, but I vomited everything in my stomach. I couldn't be bothered to say another word to them. Under the resentful gazes of the entire family, I grabbed Ethan's hand and left, pulling him into the car to go home. When the Mid-Autumn Festival came, my mother called Ethan, insisting that we go look at houses with them. At the real estate office, my father sat with an icy expression. Part 4. Emily, your nephew is the one who will carry on the Johnson family name. What's the big deal about giving him a house? Since that house is sold, buy them a bigger one. We've already picked this one. Ethan, go put down the deposit. I looked at them in utter disbelief. Carrying on the Johnson family name? Then why are you reaching out your hands for a house that belongs to the Williams family? If anyone owes him, it's you and my brother, not me and Ethan. My father frowned. Don't forget what your last name is. I pointed at my stomach. Dad, didn't you always say that daughters are useless? That they're only meant to carry on someone else's family name? So why am I suddenly still part of the Johnson family now? My father was so taken aback that he had no response. He slumped onto the sofa, clutching his chest in agony. He had a history of heart disease. Every time they made some ridiculous demand, the moment I resisted even a little, he would pull this same trick. He had long been accustomed to using my filial piety as a bargaining chip for everything. But what he didn't know was that once my sense of filial duty disappeared, I could become a runaway horse, one that could never be tamed again. As long as I no longer felt any familial affection, they could no longer use it to morally bind me. In my past life, because of his health, I had always solved problems with money, never daring to say a harsh word to him. But at this moment, I truly wished he would pass out right then and there. Ethan looked at me in surprise, a flicker of admiration flashing through his eyes. Mom, Dad, please don't take this to heart. When a woman is pregnant, her estrogen levels rise significantly, which can cause hormonal imbalances, leading to mood swings and emotional outbursts. Before Ethan could even finish, Ethan slammed his foot against the coffee table beside me. The employees in the real estate office were startled and immediately backed away 5 meters. What the hell? Mood swings my ass? Just because she's pregnant, she thinks she's some big shot? When my wife was pregnant, I told her to go east. She didn't dare go west. If she pissed me off, I'd beat her, and she still gave birth to a pair of twins. His face was flushed red with rage as he bellowed, I'm your blood brother. This house, you will buy it, whether you want to or not. If you don't, you're not walking out of here today. Part 5. In the end, I burst out laughing. Ethan, you must have helped build the Great Wall of China back in the Qin dynasty, huh? Your skin is thicker than those ancient walls. Just think how much material that saved. I smirked. It's my money. What does you buying a house have to do with me? My mother hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Emily, your brother and his wife don't have any money. You and Ethan earn so much. If you don't spend it on your brother, your nephew, and niece, then who will you spend it on? Have you forgotten? When you were little, your brother carried you every day, comforted you, and played with you. If she hadn't brought it up, I wouldn't have even wanted to remember. When I was little, my brother stole my lunch money every day, leaving me so hungry that I developed a stomach condition. In the freezing winter, he stuffed me into a snowman, making me so sick that I suffered from severe pneumonia. And that wasn't even the worst of it. He once gathered a group of boys and stripped off my pants, while he stood by, laughing hysterically. I ran home crying and told my parents. They simply said, He's a boy. What's the big deal if he eats more? He was just playing around with you. And about stripping my pants? What's there to be scared of? It's not like you weren't wearing underwear. Even now, my mother could still say things like this. I was young back then, but I wasn't stupid. What she didn't realize was that this trick of hers no longer worked on me. From now on, not a single cent of my hard-earned money would ever be spent on any of them again. I glanced at Ethan. If you're useless, at least know your place. Is this how you talk to the person who gives you money? If you piss me off, you won't even get to live in the house you're in now. The room fell silent. No one dared to say another word. If I hadn't reminded them, they might have forgotten that the house they were currently living in was also bought by Ethan and me. Before leaving, I casually threw in one last remark. Last time I was home, I think I accidentally drank my sister-in-law's medicine. Next time, don't put the medicine in identical bowls. It's hard to tell them apart. I saw my parents' faces turn deathly pale, but they tried their best to hide their fear. Helen instinctively clutched her stomach. Part 6. Ethan cursed. Get lost! Emily, you're a disgrace. Sitting in the car, I let out a bitter laugh. Until my laughter turned into tears. They had no idea. Not only had I switched the bowls of medicine, but I had also swapped the bottles in the kitchen. I couldn't wait to watch them suffer from the consequences of their own actions, to see them destroy their so-called precious grandson with their own hands. Ethan was right about one thing. I really was despicable. At some point, I had become used to my parents' hypocritical faces, used to Ethan's crude insults, used to the absurd demands of this entire family, used to disregarding Ethan's feelings. What a tragedy for my unborn child. It had to die because of my stupidity. Recalling the utter despair I felt right before my death, I unconsciously tightened my grip on Ethan's hand. Ethan gently patted my back, trying to calm me down. Don't be angry anymore. As long as you're happy, I don't mind anything else. My eyes turned red, but I didn't explain anything to him. Ethan, I'm sorry. From now on, I won't let you suffer anymore. Looking out the car window, I saw my parents standing behind the glass door, staring at me coldly. Having a family like this, what a blessing, right? I placed my hand on my stomach. I knew they wouldn't let me go so easily. Now that I had a second chance at life, I would protect my child at all costs. Everyone who had hurt my baby would pay a heavy price. After that day, I didn't go back home for over 2 months. Aside from a few intense inspections from the authorities, everything remained peaceful, until my mother suddenly showed up at my house, bringing my nephew and niece with her. The moment I opened the door, the kids hesitated for a second before dashing toward me as if they were playing a game. Part 7. Auntie! We missed you so much. I stepped aside. The 2 kids lunged forward, only to crash into empty space and fall to the floor. My mother looked a bit awkward. They adore you and just wanted to hug you. Why did you dodge? Look at them. They got hurt. I pretended to be concerned. Oh no, how could you be so careless? Does it hurt? As I bent down, the 2 children exchanged sly grins and suddenly lunged straight at my stomach. Rather than calling it lunging, it was more like ramming. But I was prepared. With one hand, I grabbed my niece's ponytail, and with the other, I firmly held my nephew's head. Both of them screamed in pain and eventually burst into tears. My mother stood there, stunned and speechless. Did you take the wrong medicine? You used to dote on them the most. That's right. If Dad hadn't been secretly giving me strong blood-activating medicine for so long, I wouldn't have ended up losing both my life and my child, and I certainly wouldn't have had today's awakening. I carefully recalled everything. In reality, all the signs had been there in my past life. For example, when I first discovered I was pregnant, my father forced me to soak in a bathtub for at least half an hour every day. When I had an inflamed wisdom tooth, my mother insisted I get it extracted. And not just the inflamed one, but 3 others as well. Helen had even accidentally broken a mercury thermometer in my bedroom while I was fast asleep, then shut all the windows. When I woke up and saw the mercury beads scattered on the floor, I was furious. She cried and said, I didn't mean to break it. You're pregnant, so I was afraid you'd catch a cold. That's why I didn't open the windows. I didn't know that stuff was toxic. Every time I ate at home, the table was always filled with seafood. Afraid I wouldn't eat enough, my mother would peel the shrimp and feed me herself. Back then, I thought, being pregnant was wonderful. Everyone suddenly pampered me. There was only one thing that puzzled me. The small black dog that Ethan and I raised loved playing with children. But whenever my nephew and niece came over, it would bark furiously. Ethan used to say, "Dogs have instincts." Thinking back now, he was absolutely right. After lunch, my mother suddenly began criticizing my housekeeper, saying that her cooking wasn't nutritious enough and insisting that she personally take care of me instead. I pretended not to hear her, and instead cheerfully led my nephew and niece to the bedroom, asking, "Do you want Auntie's dolls and model collections?" They jumped up excitedly. "Yes!" "Yes," I smiled. "Then tell Auntie, what did your parents teach you before coming here?" My nephew looked at me in confusion, then glanced longingly at the display case filled with model collections. No, they didn't teach us anything." I pretended to be troubled. "Oh, really? Well then, I guess I'll give these models to my cousin's son instead." I turned to look at my niece. She hesitated, clearly wanting the dolls, but unsure if she should speak. In the past, I had bought her plenty of dolls, but I later realized that once she owned something, she lost interest. She always preferred other people's things. Whenever I took her out, she would always try to snatch other children's toys. I pretended to make a phone call to my cousin. Panicked, my nephew immediately blurted out the truth. Mom said, "Auntie won't give us a house anymore because she has a baby now. Dad told us to play with Auntie more and try to bump into her belly so that the baby would fall out. If there's no baby, all of Auntie and Uncle's money will be ours."
Thank you for watching. Your support means everything. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories. See you in the next video.